If you've watched my channel before, then you probably know what the GachaSP is. In fact, I've done 2 videos on the GachaSP on 2 different revisions, an early public release and a final revision. And if you know that, then you know that I'm your cool Uncle Marissa. And in my last video, I promised a little showcase of the Aluminium shell. One thing that sets the GachaSP apart from a lot of other Game Boy mods is, first of all, it's on the Game Boy Advance, which is a pretty rare mod in the community, but also the hardest part about this mod is sandwiching everything together. And while that was greatly ameliorated in the final revision, if you remember, I did have some notes of like, you know, the fact that this is resin, the fact that it's so malleable and so flexible does give more of an opportunity to make mistakes in assembling your sandwich. Of course, there's also other issues with resin, such as it will only allow you to thread it a few times, so you can't keep opening it and closing it, and just a variety of other factors to weigh against the beauty of resin. Lucky for me, GachaSP co-creator Joseph Tompkins did send me an aluminium front shell for me to test, and my findings are that that is the way to go. If you don't want to watch the rest of this video, that's fine. I mean, I really would like you to watch the rest of this video, but definitely go for the aluminium front. I know aluminium's more expensive, it has fewer options when it comes to colors, but there's just a plethora of advantages to it. First off, as I will show you, assembly was a lot smoother because the aluminium doesn't have any give. The tolerances on the aluminium shell are a lot more unified to the specs because there's not that, you know, discrepancy that you get in resin. There's not the effect of temperature that resin has. There's not that flexibility again. So you really know what you're getting into. Also, it definitely harks back to something I did say in, I think, both of my GachaSP videos, that I highly recommend not doing a transparent build just because there's so much going on in there and you don't necessarily always want to see that. For example, the trimmed membranes, unless you do an absolutely perfect job, it's going to look a little bit bleh. So having it be opaque is a really good little side benefit of the aluminium. And now to quickly address the clickbait of the title, I imagine I'm probably gonna be titling it, I fixed the issue with the GachaSP. My main issue with it, and something that a lot of commenters also noticed and remarked upon, is the switches are really loud. They're very clicky and it can be a bit jarring, especially if you want to use it to play longer sessions. You know, I think if you pick up and play an arcade style game, it's fine. It's a bit of like those pinball machine vibes to an extent, but it can be a huge turnoff. So I figured while I'm closing this up again, why not try to fix that? So I put electrical tape on top of each switch and I will let it speak for itself. And so that we don't have that in a vacuum, let me play the Game Boy Advance SP for you. That's way better, right? That's so much better. In fact, I think it's a little bit too much better because I think it's just a little muffled at this point. So what I'm going to do myself, and I would recommend you do this as well, unless you want it just this muffled, is instead of using electrical tape, which is pretty thick, use Kapton tape and go in layers. And as you're going in layers, just test it out and see what it's like. You might even want a different number of layers on each button because, for example, you might notice that even now, that's the start button, that's the B button. The start button is still clickier than the B button, and I think that might have to do with the shape of the buttons themselves. So you might want to have different amounts of tape on each switch to get an even more even experience, or just something that feels better for you and your tactile preference when it comes to playing. But yeah, those are the main points. And so let's just take a look at the differences between the resin front shell and the aluminium, as well as the middle part. Now, another sort of fringe benefit of this is that with the aluminium shell, you cannot see the middle part. So you can print it in whatever 3D printed material, and we decided to try the Somos Ledo material, which is a kind of like off-white yellowish tint, but it's advertised as being quite strong and durable, and it was really affordable because there's no finish on it. There's no like painting or anything of that sort. We're not after aesthetics because it's just literally there to perform a function and not there for its looks. All right, so let's get to it. All right, so first off, we have the two different middle parts. The one on the right is the new one for the aluminium shell, and the one on the left is the one that I used for my resin build, and it is spray painted. They look very, very similar, but have some minor differences. For example, the aluminium one does not have the ridge, and I think a big reason for that is because there's not as much flex in the aluminium. You don't really need to tuck away your wires. There's also a lack of the upper ridge. Now for the shells themselves, they are really essentially the same aside from material, but there's a lot more consistency with the ridges for the membranes. All right, so let's build this thing. So here I am putting electrical tape on the switches to see if that affects the sound. Now, I very much recommend using Kapton tape for this and not electrical tape for a couple of reasons. First off, electrical tape is thicker, so you're not really able to tune it as much as you would with Kapton tape. Second, something that I found that happened is that if the device is exposed to a certain amount of heat, the button can get stuck because the adhesive for the electrical tape is a lot more sensitive to heat than Kapton tape is. I would say use a few layers of Kapton tape, but similarly just try to go on each individual switch, because if you put the tape over multiple switches at once, that is going to affect your inputs and you will not have a good time. The first thing that I'm gonna screw is the PCB to the front shell, and this felt so much more secure because the screw goes in and it has a beginning and an end, and I don't have to worry about the flexibility of the resin. This is especially important because the screws for the PCB only go on the top left and top right of the PCB. So if you exert more force on a flexible material, the PCB is going to be angled. And then when you screw in the middle part, which you screw in the bottom to keep the PCB in place, you can have issues with both the switches being different feels across the top ones and the bottom ones. It's just not great for the integrity of the resin or the PCB. Now I can stick the middle part in. So I was worried about the lack of the ridge, but it just kind of goes in pretty seamlessly. And there's a lot less finickiness to it. I know it's finicky enough that I still have to take it really close to myself to be able to see what I'm doing. And you do want to arrange the wires in such a way that they're not all on top of each other or causing any sort of obstruction anywhere, but you don't have to arrange them in any sort of specific routing the way that you do with the resin version. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and screw the middle part of the sandwich to the front part for securing the PCB. And that's about the best time to test the buttons, because you want to see if you need to take any pressure off via the loosening of screws, or if you're happy with the way things are. With the top 3 screws, the first time I screwed them in, I didn't go through the middle part at all. So just make sure that they're aligned, since it's harder to see when you don't have a transparent shell and your aluminum shell is quite thick, so you feel like something's happening, but it is not. Just a quick peek here, you'll see that my speaker is in the same place that I had put it in the resin build. I had thought that with the aluminum build, because everything's more even, it would fit better, but for some reason that wasn't the case for me. Maybe I just wanted my board to be a bit tighter, to have my buttons higher, and that was the issue. But you know, this kind of tells me that it still might be a better idea to go Joseph's route and put a switch speaker or just a more powerful speaker in if you are going to use an external speaker. Everything else is self-explanatory, so here it is. Everything is in order, it feels good, and this was much easier and much more stress-free to put together than a resin build. And I know that probably it's a bit easier because I've put this together so many times by now, but I think even if I'd never put it together, the aluminum would be a lot easier to work with than the resin. Now, I think if you go straight for the aluminum, you're probably going to still find it challenging and maybe take for granted how much easier it is compared to the resin build, but you know, that's a luxury that I think you should be allowed. So those are the differences, and then how to put it together, kind of. It's honestly the same way of putting it together, but as we saw, there's just some very, very minor differences. Now, in terms of my GachaSP, I have ordered a different back for it. I'm going with like the pearlescent purple instead of this transparent shell. I'm probably going to keep the pink triggers, and since the buttons are 3D printed, if you remember, I didn't get these 3D printed at PCBWay, and I ended up kind of regretting that when it came to quality for something that is so visually important. I might get them reprinted, but I do have some thoughts on that real quick. So if you notice, the start and select button are like yellow, right? That's because the membrane is yellow. Now, it's much cheaper if you are printing with PCBWay or another fabricator to print in transparent than it is to print in color, which is generally what they do, is they print white and they spray paint it. And spray painting can also affect tolerances, so I don't know if you necessarily want that for buttons. I would say print them in transparent and then color them by using the membrane that you want in that color. So I might do that. I might also try out the concave D-pad that Joseph has on the PCBWay just to mix things up. Yeah, and I'm gonna try different layers of Kapton tape on the switches to see if I can hit that sweet spot. I probably won't do it for a while because I'm kind of gotcha'd out. This is a lie. This is a big fat lie. I don't know what's wrong with me. I have no patience. I will never be anythinged out as long as there is a thought in my mind on something that I want to change. So yeah, I changed it. And the answer is three layers of Kapton tape. Not a comment on the device. I love it. I love like messing with it. But you know when you say a word so much that it loses all meaning?
It's hot in Topeka.
It's hot in Topeka.
That's kind of what listening to the switches has become to me, or even just feeling the switches. I don't know what I'm looking for anymore. So yeah, but I don't think I'll be making another video unless there are major revisions. So if you are also gotcha'd out and you're just like, look, I just want all the information so I can make my perfect GachaSP. Can you just give me the information? That's it. That's all the information. That's all the information that I can come up with. So go forth. Wait, I lied. There's one more information. So I was talking to Joseph and I was like, I fixed this issue about the clicking. And he was like, you know, it doesn't bother me, the clicking. I don't feel like it's that loud. And after a bit of going back and forth, we realized that he had unintentionally been dampening his switches as well. And the way he was doing it is that he included the foam insert that comes with the Game Boy Advance SP displays that goes behind it. And he'd included the foam insert, and that foam insert is obviously having the effect of dampening the sound of the switches. So if you still have your foam insert, if you just bought a new display or something, that is definitely something to keep in mind and also try. Not something that I will be trying, but as a mechanical keyboard hobbyist, I can guarantee it will make a difference. But that's all for this. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to anyone who helps out by donating to my Ko-fi or clicking on the affiliate links below. If you are building a GachaSP and you want to share it, I would really love to see it. They're so cute. And if this is your first exposure to the GachaSP, please check out my other videos. I will link those in the description as well so that you can get an idea of, if not the evolution, at least just watch the video on the final revision, because that is a build guide as well. And hopefully that'll be very helpful on your journey as well, since it does have quite a few tips and tricks that might not be super intuitive. Otherwise, I've been your cool Uncle Marissa, and don't forget that cool uncle loves you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.